What it do? Welcome to another new episode of Locked On Bucks. On today's show, the Milwaukee Bucks defeat the Houston Rockets 128 to 119. This victory was the Bucks' 13th straight win at home in Fiserv Forum, improved them to 14-1 at home on the season, and it snapped the Rockets' 5-game winning streak. It was a big night for the Bucks' big three. They scored 2/3 of the Bucks' points tonight. Giannis etched his name into franchise history again. And Andre Jackson Jr. shined during some big minutes. Is he making the case for a bigger role in the rotation? All that and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Camille Davis. You can catch me weekly on the Technical Foul Podcast, as well as Cheesehead TV's Carry the G and MKE. Joining me is longtime voice of the pod, founder of BrewHoop.com, Frank Madden. We appreciate you for tuning in, and thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnba and use code all lowercase lockedonnba for a first deposit match up to $100. All right, Frank. So today's game, the Rockets never really went away in this game. In the fourth quarter, they even were able to cut that lead down to about 3 points. But we had a big fourth quarter from Khris Middleton. He dropped 14 of his 20 points in the fourth. We had a big game from Dame, 39 points, 11 assists. That 39 points actually ties his season high with the team. And Giannis, as I mentioned, etching his name in the Bucks history books again. The man had 26 points and 17 rebounds. That 14th rebound that he got of the night moved him past Kareem for number one in rebounding in franchise history. It's amazing seeing all three of these guys cook at the same time. Like I mentioned, the three accounted for 66% of the Bucks points tonight, about 85 of those this evening. And this is the second game this season where all three guys had at least 20 points. The last time we saw that, ironically enough, was the Pacers game in that in-season tournament loss in Vegas when Giannis had 37, Dame had 24, and Khris Middleton had 20.
Yeah, and it was a little weird, right? Because Khris, I thought, did not look particularly good for about 3 quarters, and
until the fourth.
Even when he was making shots in the fourth quarter, he was oftentimes matched up with Dillon Brooks, and it just felt like Dillon Brooks's physicality was just like not something that Khris was entirely ready for or able to kind of handle as well as you would want. And again, that's like a bit of a sneak peek for the playoffs, right? Guys playing with physicality. And I think the positive spin obviously is that he fought through it, and he was the only guy scoring to start that fourth quarter. The Bucks were bleeding points. They had built up to about a 14-point lead in the third quarter, and then again needed Khris to kind of resuscitate them a little bit early in the fourth. And the interesting thing was Giannis had his streak of 30-point games snapped on Saturday against the Pistons, in no small part because he didn't play the fourth quarter and they didn't really need him. But in this game, he had 17 points in the first half, finishes with 26. But this is the first time he's been under 50% shooting since that Celtics game on November 22nd, only 5 out of 11 for the free throw line. He did hit a 3, which I didn't want him to shoot that 3, but 6 turnovers. I think this is the first game in quite a while that he didn't have either a single block or steal. And so something seemed off with him tonight. And I think obviously the Rockets have a lot of defenders that they can throw at him, whether it's Dillon Brooks, Jae'Sean Tate, Jabari Smith. I thought also last year we saw in the second game between these two teams, they really frustrated Giannis, with Jabari Smith being kind of the primary defender of a lot of that time. So yeah, Giannis just kind of seemed like not quite, where he's been certainly over the past few weeks. He's been just incredible for quite a while, really since that Celtics game. But again, with Giannis, it's like the quote unquote bad night is 26 and 17, right? So
Right.
like the baseline is just super high. And then, as you said, like Dame's just, he just filled it up, right? 15 points in the first quarter. And really like that blitz he had at the end of the first quarter, that kind of put the Bucks ahead and basically gave them the runway to kind of play from the front the entire game. And so, again, they were denied the double-digit win by that Fred VanVleet 3 right at the end. So would have liked that one for the point differential. But interesting to look at the score. You look at the kind of stats at the end of the game, because the Rockets came in with the 25th ranked offense and the second ranked defense. It didn't matter to the Bucks on both ends. The Bucks put up like 126 offensive rating, something like that. So, for all of the pressure that the Rockets can put on you, kind of with ball pressure with the guards, whether it's Brooks and VanVleet in particular, right? Like there were stretches where Dame wasn't even bringing the ball up because they just didn't want to have him have to deal with Dillon Brooks or VanVleet pressuring him off the floor. But at the end of the day, you still put up an absolute ton of points. And, again, 128 on an efficient night, scoring for the team against the second ranked defense in the league. So the offense, once again, just sort of carrying the Bucks to where they needed to get to. 13 of 36 from 3, 36%, nothing to really to write home up there. 15 turnovers, felt like they were a bit sloppy there. But really, to me, I mean, the unique game aspect of this was really the second chance points. 16 offensive rebounds. I think they were up close to 40% offensive rebound rate, and a 20% offensive rebound rate allowed. So, we've complained a lot about the Bucks defensive rebounding and how they haven't been able to get as much offensive rebounding as you would like, considering, some of the transition they've given up and some of those concerns that they've had. So tonight you end up doing the job on the defensive glass. You get a bunch of second chance points. I think at one point it was like 20-2 in terms of second chance points. And ultimately that was kind of the difference in this game, where both teams scored effectively. But it was, Dame and basically Giannis had 6 offensive rebounds. Andre Jackson Jr. had 4 offensive rebounds. Bobby had 4 offensive rebounds. Those were the kind of the key guys that were giving the Bucks those second chances, those reloads. And just was nice to kind of get away from this game, get out of this game. Khris had some big shots in the fourth quarter, and could have been more dramatic probably down the stretch, but the Bucks kind of were able to stiff arm the Rockets well enough. And it's a good win, right? I mean, they'd won 5 games in a row. They shot 41% from 3. So again, I don't think you can complain much getting a near double-digit win against the Houston Rockets. Yes, of course, you'd love for the defense to have held up better, but at this point, I feel like we say that every game, Camille. So as long as they win games against good teams, I think, again, like for where they are right now, probably feel pretty good about it. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about Andre Jackson Jr. starting again in Malik Beasley's place, and kind of what that might mean, especially as we think about their kind of defensive ceiling and where that needs to get to by the playoffs.
Absolutely. And to your point about Dame just heating up, we've had conversations on this podcast throughout the season so far about Dame having historically slower starts to the season. We talked about why that might be even more this particular season, given the fact that he had to deal with the trade request and not being able to go in the gym and get some 5v5 game action in. So looking at Dame's stats so far in October, which is only a 3-game sample size, so it's very small, 23.3 points, 4.3 assists, 5.7 rebounds a game. He shot 39% from the field and 29.6% from 3. The month of November, you see that heating up more. 14-game sample size, averaged 26, 7.4, and 4 rebounds a game. He shot 42% from the field, 34% from 3. And so far in the month of December, we've had 7 games so far. He's averaging 26.3 points, getting about 7.7 assists per game and 4.7 rebounds. But here's the thing. He's shooting now 46% from the field and 44% from 3. This is Dame's second back-to-back 30-point game that he had. And again, the Bucks were on the second night of a back-to-back in this game, which makes it even a little bit more impressive with these old legs being able to carry some weight. And we mentioned the fact that Giannis has another franchise record. He is now the Bucks franchise leader in rebounds, and now he's the Bucks franchise leader in points, rebounds, assists, triple doubles, games played, amongst others. And one of my favorite things I saw after the game, Khris Middleton was asked, did he ever think that Giannis would hold all of these different franchise records? And Khris' response was, quote, Hell no. Hell no. Now he's got everything except for that three ball. And Giannis was in the background and he had to add in his 2 cents. And he mentioned the fact like, hey, it might take me 20 years, but I'm going to get that 3-point record. So you love to see the banner between those two. You love seeing what the big three was able to do. Even with some uneven performances throughout the game, they all showed up in big moments. And you mentioned Andre Jackson Jr., and that's definitely somebody I want to dig into a little bit deeper. We've had conversations about what the optimal starting lineup might look like for this Milwaukee Bucks team. And with Malik Beasley out tonight, we got our very first look at a Dame, A-Jax, K-Mid, Giannis, and Brooks starting five. So I want to talk a little bit about how that looked, as well as is Andre starting to make a case for a bigger role in the rotation. So we're going to take a look at that coming up next. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. And honestly, it's my favorite way to play. Like when I'm thinking daily fantasy sports, I'm thinking Prize Picks in large part because of how easy and exciting it is. What I love the most is that I don't have to worry about what other players are doing. I'm not thinking about what professionals got going on, what the Sharks got going on, because it's really just me against the numbers. So with Prize Picks, what you do is that you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 different player stat projections, and then you just watch those winnings roll right on in. And I've mentioned it before, but I'm about my winnings. So the ease in which I can move my money around is another reason why I love Prize Picks. Prize Picks has quick withdrawals, and you can use Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits. You mix all that in with the easy gameplay and an enormous selection of players. It's just super easy to see why Prize Picks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnba and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, head to prizepicks.com/lockedonnba and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Time is valuable. We appreciate you for spending it with Locked On Bucks. A special shout out to everybody who tunes in on a daily basis. Those everydayers who come in Monday through Friday. We super appreciate what y'all do. And if you enjoy what we do here on Locked On Bucks, I got to put you up on something else that you might enjoy, because Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you with 24/7 coverage of the top sports stories of the day. It's brought to you by all the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Frank, we talked about Andre Jackson Jr. a little bit, teased him in that first segment there. And as I mentioned, tonight we saw a lineup for the very first time. This is the first time we saw the starting lineup with Andre Jackson as like the starting two guard here. This is his 5th start so far this season. His first start came where he subbed in for Giannis against Toronto. His second one came when he subbed in for Khris Middleton against Dallas. His third one came when he subbed in again for Khris Middleton against Portland. We saw that 4th start this weekend as well against Detroit, where him and MarJon stepped in for Bees and Khris Middleton. And tonight, season high, 36 minutes. What did you think of seeing Andre Jackson in the starting lineup with the rest of these guys here? Kind of in that Malik Beasley role.
Yeah, I mean the minute total kind of blew me away. Like I had to do a double take at the 36 minutes. I mean, we joked about how, his fouling kind of limits him from playing big minutes. Of course, he fouled out tonight, befitting of what he's done so far this year. And it's interesting, I mean, I've talked a lot about, this year how like I want to see more of him. On paper, he makes sense as a 5th starter because the Bucks have so much firepower offensively with the other 4 guys. There aren't really many shots available anyway, and they badly need somebody at the 1 through 3 spots that can kind of take the toughest defensive assignment, can be a point of attack guy and just bring some energy, because between Dame, Malik, and now Khris as well, you just don't have a guy that you feel comfortable saying like, okay, guard the ball, stop the ball, be that, annoying guy that pressures and creates havoc and, gets deflections and do that stuff. So on paper, I think what we've seen from him is, it kind of makes sense in theory, like that he can be that guy. I was looking at like the numbers, like the lineup data. I mean, he's like the worst guy on the team in terms of like on-off rating. Like the offense coming in tonight, the offense was 12 points per 100 worse with him on the floor. The defense was 5 or 6 points per 100 worse, like, which doesn't make any sense, right? Like, why would the defense, be worse with him on the floor versus like Malik Beasley? Malik Beasley, give him credit. Like the
Mm-hmm.
lineup data with Malik has been awesome now. It was really bad like the first week or so of the season, and it's kind of completely turned around. The starting group has been really good, right? And that group usually closes games too, in spite of the lack of a defensive stopper. It's worked. They've been really effective. So on the one hand, it's kind of hard to say like, well, you know, it's all like working, but we're now just going to bench Malik,
Right.
because in theory, it just doesn't feel like it should work in the playoffs, or it feels like we need a more of at least one guy who kind of brings more of that defensive edge. Um, and normally I'm somebody, obviously, as Camille, like I look to find like, where does my eye test match what the numbers are telling me, right? Like how do I kind of like test what I'm seeing with data to kind of give confidence that that's actually what's the results are showing on the floor. And
Mm-hmm.
right now, it's not so much. But I think especially with Andre being a rookie, I think, kind of the existential question is, do you really think that you can win 4 rounds in the playoffs with, the kind of default starting group? I don't. I don't think that Dame, Beasley, Khris, and then Giannis and Brook defending the rim. Like I just don't think you have enough wing defense in that group to start and close games with them. So I think you have to be thinking about what your other options are. And, your other options are either start, Andre, MarJon, or Pat Connaughton at the 2 guard in place of Malik. Doesn't mean Malik isn't going to play a lot, right? You
Right.
just put him in spots where he's going to be coming off the bench and being that microwave guy off the bench, and still presuming playing a lot. But like we were kind of joking about Malik playing like 36 to 40 minutes a night when they were dealing with all that all the injuries with Pat and Jay being out and all that. And it's just like, okay, that also like doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Um, so I think it's sort of a bit of a question for the Bucks. It's like, do they proactively try to make a change, look at some different options now because they know that they need to do something else come playoff time, or do they kind of just like keep rolling with this and say, you know what, we'll figure it out later, right? I mean, a couple of years ago, we saw Bud start Grayson Allen basically the whole year, and then in the last couple of weeks of the season say, okay, we're getting close to the playoffs. Wes, you're in. You're going to be my guy off the bench, because I know I'm going to need you defensively for us to be at our best, and Grayson can come off the bench. And, kind of went out the window then pretty quickly because Khris gets hurt in that first round series against Chicago. And they ended up needing Grayson and Wes to start together a lot. And eventually we saw then Bobby move into the starting lineup as well. But yeah, it's just it's kind of an interesting, to me, this is like the biggest question about the Bucks, right? Like, what are they doing with the 5th starter spot? How do they bring more wing defense into the rotation? And we'll see. I mean, I think especially against like tonight we saw Andre defending Fred VanVleet a lot, and it felt like, I don't know how you saw it, Camille, but it felt like, especially when there was a really high screen and roll, felt like Andre would kind of like almost walk up to the screen and just like get up against the guy, and then
Yeah.
just like Fred VanVleet was able to get a run up. And it's just sort of like, Andre, like, I feel like you're kind of setting the screen for the guy by just kind of like burrowing into him preemptively. So don't know if I loved like the technique there, like maybe try to be a bit more evasive trying to get around the screen. And that's obviously one of the kind of perpetual problems when you try to put bigger guys on small guys, is it's just harder to navigate screens, especially really far from the hoop. So we'll see. I mean, this is a problem all the Bucks guards have:
Yep.
big, small, fast, slow. They all suck at getting over screens. So we'll kind of see what happens. I mean, normally they just switch a lot of those actions anyway, because it's like, all right, Malik and Dame, who cares? Just switch it, rather than kind of trying really hard to go over, especially like the small screens. But when it's obviously Brook in the action, then whoever it is going to have to go over the screen, because you're not generally switching Brook onto a small guy. So yeah, we'll kind of see how it evolves. I mean, again, I was kind of joking with some people offline just about how, I was really curious if Malik missed a couple. Like I was really curious, is like, if Malik sits out a couple of games for whatever reason, like obviously I don't want him to get hurt, but
Right.
now he has the illness, he sits out a couple of games. I think it's been an instructive, at least, opportunity to see kind of what this group looks like. Because kind of as you were alluding to, I mean, I was just trying to see, has Andre played with Khris, Giannis, and Dame at all this season? Not until tonight. There was no lineup data on those four together. Obviously, we saw he's played without Khris and with Dame and Giannis. Those numbers aren't good, but it's small sample stuff. And
Right.
so we'll see. I think this to me is kind of like a proof of concept, watching him do some of this stuff tonight. And again, I'm guessing Malik goes back in the starting five when he's healthy. Hopefully, on Tuesday, obviously, hopefully he starts to feel better. But hopefully, we'll continue to see them at least experiment with Andre and see kind of what he can bring to the mix. Because again, they're going to need somebody to me, and it does seem like Andre is the guy that probably has the most confidence from Adrian Griffin. And hey, he actually scored some points this weekend too,
Yeah.
which was a pleasant surprise. And he's actually, he's turned down so many layups, which I don't love. He basically, like, I think he had his first layup that wasn't a dunk on Saturday night. He was like 8 for 8 in the restricted area all year, all dunks. And if it wasn't a dunk, he just passed it. So he made a layup, I think, on Saturday night, and I think he was in double figures, right? So,
10 points.
he was a guy that barely got into double figures in college, and was really inefficient. And so for him so far to, and again, I hesitate to say that the 3-point shooting is
It's real.
sustainable, but, he's made three, he's 8 out of 17 coming into this game. I guess 9 out of 20 now. I think he was 1 for 3 tonight. So, hey, 9 out of 20 from three, 45%. Not going to bet on that sustaining, but it's good for him that he see the ball go through the hole. And he was a really inefficient guy in college, but came to this game at 72% true shooting. So obviously extremely low volume. His usage rate is, at Snellian levels, 10%. But again, if he's playing good defense and can at least punish the defense a little bit, I don't think anybody's going to like really guard him hard, but at least punish the defense when they do leave him open. It's just positive steps for him, and hopefully he continues to just, in his first year here, obviously hope that he can kind of get up that learning curve as quickly as possible.
Couldn't agree more. And the 3-point percentage was the part when I realized that he was shooting over 40% from three. I was like, wait, what? Is he really? Like, I saw it was a small sample size. So I was like, you take that with a grain of salt. But that's the area of his game that coming into the league, it was like, this is underdeveloped. He's not a good shooter. The jumper is ugly. I have to say it's one of the ugliest jumpers I've seen in a while, but he's cashing it right now. So it's interesting to see how that will continue on throughout the season. He has mentioned that it's something that he is working on because he knows that's something on his scouting report that people say, hey, you can't do this well. And he's like, I like that, that being challenged of saying I can't do something. It gives me extra motivation to try and actually accomplish it. So definitely going to keep an eye on how that continues to progress throughout the season. Again, a small sample size, but the returns from the small sample size have been surprising to me. You mentioned the fouling. That's definitely an issue and something that you normally do see with a lot of younger players as they're learning to adjust to the NBA. But it's like whenever he's in the game, he just makes hustle plays, offensive rebounds. If he doesn't get the offensive rebound, he's doing things just to retain possession for the Bucks. Like you mentioned, he does these little things that flash for you. And you're just like, I want to see more of this. With Bees coming back, I'm not exactly sure what that minute rotation will look like. We saw tonight with Khris Middleton coming back that MarJon minutes dropped back to what they have been, which is between, up to 15 minutes or so a game. He played 13 tonight. So with Bees coming back, I hope we can find a way to still get Andre like 10, 12 minutes a night, just to continue developing him and seeing what he might have come playoff time. And playtime is the best way that you're able to find all that stuff out. So I hope he gets an opportunity to do that. And there is still a whole lot more that we can discuss from this game, honestly, from the weekend at large, because it was a back-to-back for the Bucks this weekend with Detroit and Houston coming in.
Camille, one quick question for you. MarJon and Andre. The interesting thing to me is like how often we've seen them play together.
I love them together.
Is fun, but also sometimes I'm just sort of like, maybe there's a little bit too much youthful indiscretion there together. If if I told you you can pick one of these guys to have a major role the rest of the season, but you can only pick one, I think I know who you're going to pick, but what's your answer?
You're putting me in a tough spot here as somebody who bought early real estate on MarJon Island. So let me actually think about that for a second and come back to that right after we talk about FanDuel. I've mentioned it before. People have these preconceived notions of the NBA season not starting until Christmas. I'm going to scream it from the rooftops that the NFL season itself doesn't start until Thanksgiving. And if you're in Wisconsin, I know the Packers have a bad taste in your mouth, but every game is still matters for the Packers. They still have some type of control over their future here, and the games keep heating up. So do the offers on FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, trust me when I tell you there is no better time to do that than now. The app is super easy to use. You have a wide range of different betting options for yourself, like player props, spreads, over-unders, and more than that. So make sure that you visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get in on the action. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, Frank, you put me on the spot here with having to choose between MarJon and Andre Jackson Jr. And honestly, we have seen, in my opinion, more flashes from Andre's game than what we've seen from MarJon. MarJon feels like he's been just a little bit more sturdy. Like you know exactly what you're going to get from MarJon more times than not. He had a really good game against Detroit, I thought. But Andre just seems to just flash a little bit differently than MarJon does. He seems to have more of an impact like on offensive rebounding, just athleticism. And it's something about his game that is just, it's really interesting and fascinating for me to just continue to watch and develop because we haven't seen somebody who is as gifted as he is this young when it comes to like his passing ability, the rebounding, probably since like a Dante, maybe. So like it's one of those things where you're just like, I just want to see a little bit more of Andre. I've seen MarJon last year. We've seen a little bit of him this year in the spot minutes, but it's something about Andre Jackson Jr. And I think what I lean on more is just he seems like he's a little bit better defensively as well over MarJon. And that's what gives me a little edge over him in addition to the flashes that we've seen. But I'm curious, of those two, who do you land on?
Yeah, I think it's Andre as well. I wasn't sure, especially over the summer, just the fact that he just does not score at all. I was
Yeah,
curious, sort of just like what that would mean for the just playing at this level, especially with if he's got to share the floor with Giannis. Um, and again, I mean, like I said, so far I'm gonna come out sort of pro Andre, even though the metrics, other than kind of just some of the individual shooting stats that he has, which again is not really why you'd play him, right? Because he's
right.
like, oh, it's because he's a 45% 3-point shooter. It's like, well, okay, that's that's like a nice little, hey, the shots have gone in type thing, but you're not banking on that moving forward. Um, I think for the similar reasons that you mentioned, I just think the feel on offense, even though he is less of a scorer than MarJon, doesn't have, I think, the kind of in between game ability to kind of occasionally get to the rim and finish.
Right.
By the way, MarJon, nice finish driving and dunking on Saturday night. I think he finished with 11 points. Had a pretty quick start in that first
Mhm.
quarter for MarJon. But yeah, I think just I don't know, just something about MarJon. I just don't see necessarily like he's a bit more of a normal. Like he's not like A-Jax is just such a strange player in so many
Mhm.
ways, that I almost like am more interested in sort of seeing like how that all translates. I agree. I think defensively he's clearly better, or he's like toolsier. I think he plays with more functional athleticism than MarJon does. I don't think
That's a
MarJon
great way to
plays
say it.
with force very much. And like when he drives, even though he has a better ability to get to the basket than Andre, just feels like MarJon just kind of loses the ball a lot.
Mhm.
And certainly the passing wise, Andre's, I think, just a much more fluid passer, just higher kind of IQ type player, I think. So yeah, I think I would say Andre as well. But again, they're interesting because they're similar in some regards, in terms of kind of like size and profile, but then in other regards, in terms of their strengths, like there are some, I'd say some clear contrast between them, right? Like if you wanted, we're counting on one guy to knock a shot down to save your life, I think you'd go MarJon no matter what Andre's 3-point percentage might ever be. But we'll see. And I mean, that's kind of the unfortunate reality is that, like, I mean, these guys are kind of competing with one another for minutes to an extent. We saw it this, from really the first preseason games, really up until now. MarJon had been the guy who had been sort of the steadier minutes guy. Opening night, MarJon played, Andre didn't. Andre had been kind of like the next pecking order guy, but he's had these sort of spot starts because of, I think, the unique skill set that he has. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see moving forward. Does Andre, leapfrog MarJon in that rotation to the point where MarJon, isn't playing every night potentially? Again, as long as Jay Crowder's out, I think there's kind of room for both guys to get some run. But it's an important time for them, right? I mean,
Really?
when Jay comes back, I mean, this is their opportunity for both of them to kind of show that they deserve to get real run, and put Adrian Griffin in a spot where he's got to keep playing them, right? And figure that out. So pretty important time. We saw a year ago, MarJon played more last November under Bud than he did this November under Adrian Griffin, which I think we talked about maybe a couple of weeks ago, which that number surprised me. And but then he kind of just wasn't consistent and lost his spot in the rotation, and just kind of like, the kind of season sort of slipped away from him at that point. So I think obviously the question for both guys now is, can they avoid kind of falling into a similar situation here this year? And again, the Bucks need someone like them, I think, in that wing rotation. So we'll keep talking about it. I don't think Malik Beasley is suddenly going to become a wing stopper, no matter what the Bucks might kind of wish he could be. So yeah, again, just sort of stay tuned and keep watching, and hopefully those guys continue to get some opportunities, and more importantly, hopefully they kind of make Adrian Griffin have to play them. And again, probably the most intriguing question is just, depending on what those guys do, what does that mean for what John Horst looks to do at the trade deadline? And on the one hand, in some ideal scenario, like, one of them plays so well, like Andre plays so well, that it's like, hey, we're just going to play this dude, and we don't feel like we need to go spend, the Portland second round pick from this coming draft. That's like around the number 35 pick right now. And obviously you got Bobby, Pat, as kind of contracts, right? I'm sure John Horst would love it if he felt like he didn't have to move any of those things in order to get an upgrade on the wing, and he could just play the dudes that he has now. But the flip side as well is, if you don't see the trajectory from MarJon and you like what you have from Andre, maybe you look to move MarJon, in a kind of upgrade your wing rotation type move as well. So again, I think the Bucks, people talk about the Bucks like not having any assets, whatever. Like, look, they don't have the assets to make another Dame Lillard trade or something like that. But can they add kind of a depth piece at the deadline? Like, yeah, I mean, again, especially if you're willing to put MarJon on the table, who knows? Maybe for the right guy, would you put Andre on the table, right? I mean, that's an option, right? Would people not give up Andre Jackson if you had a deal that could maybe swing you for, I'm making it up, Alex Caruso?
It's a tough one.
I mean, sorry, A-Jax. I think I think I'm going to go with the guy who actually is an all defensive guy now, because my window is right now. But anyway, it's definitely going to be interesting to see just kind of where the trade rumors go for the Bucks, because again, I think they will have some optionality at the deadline, and the question is just, how much do they trust the guys they have now, and what are their assets worth on the market if they do want to make a move.
And knowing John Horst, I'm sure he already has an idea of what, some of the value is for both of those guys, as well as some other members on this Bucks roster. But it was a big weekend for the MarJax, the combo here. You mentioned the fact that they are in competition with one another, and they enjoy playing with each other. They enjoy hyping each other up. They mentioned they enjoy being on the court together because they can see another young dude next to them. Like, hey, it's not just me trying to figure all this out. I have him out here as well. So I love the way that they're able to complement each other in certain ways, but also push each other. And competition is good for the team. And like you mentioned, I hope that they put Adrian Griffin in a situation where he has to figure out a way to continue to give minutes because they have carved out a role. At least one of them can, because the Bucks need some young wing defenders who can step up. And if one of them could pop, that'd be really big for this team, given their salary cap situation. And having some young guys that can provide and play valuable minutes would be super valuable for this team. So that'll actually do it for us here today. Let us know in the comments here how you feel about Andre Jackson Jr. What do you think the ideal starting five is for this Bucks team? I really am curious to know what some of y'all think as well. So let us know in the YouTube comments your ideal starting five for the Bucks. Also, make sure that you go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Locked On Sports Today comes through with that 24 coverage of all the top sports stories of the day with all of the local experts of Locked On. So make sure y'all go and check that out after we close here. For Frank and myself, we're going to catch you later.